Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. On today's episode of The Process, we have a conversation on Oppenheimer with producer Emma Thomas and production designer Ruth Jong.
Hello everybody, welcome to The Process. I'm Emma Thomas and I had the great good fortune to work with Ruth Jong, our production designer, on Oppenheimer. Hello Ruth, how are you today?
Wonderful, Emma. It's great to be here with you, and I'm excited to dive into these questions with you because it's fascinating. You know, once I'm so far along in the process, to back up is always fascinating to relive and actually get those stories that I never probably heard.
I agree. It's actually something that Chris and I often sort of do when we get to the end of a film. We kind of sit down and we sort of talk about, well, how did it go? What was bad? You know, how did, you know, so this is kind of an extension of that, which I'm very much excited to get to do. I'll start by asking you, Ruth. Obviously, I remember when we first met with you on this film, I was very pleased that you agreed to come and work with us, because I know that you had literally just finished another film, that you had no room to breathe. So we were very lucky to get you. How was that for you, jumping from Nope into a whole other universe with absolutely no decompression time whatsoever?
I think it was a positive, to be honest, because I didn't have time to get scared or have fear. That's what was actually what I actually was accepting. And I think obviously on Nope, I had the privilege of working with Hoyte van Hoytema, our cinematographer, and Scott Fisher, and both of their entire teams. So we had gone through a year together, and also we're building an entire Western town, very different, very stylized, but a ton of building, and we had a groove going, and we were all in sync with one another and loved working with one another, and that I feel like was sort of the strength, that just all of that energy and synergy went right into Oppenheimer. And then the excitement of, you know, I remember going back to set and Hoyte and Scott were like, how did it go? I was like, I don't know. We'll see. And they were just so kind and so wonderful, and obviously, you know, could vouch and let Chris and you know about the experience we had on Nope. And I think so I had it come in a different way, and maybe I hadn't been on a film, and then the daunting task of saying, you're about to go work for Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas, it would be like,
well, I hope also, I mean, I think that one of the things that we do on our films, and it's something that we've developed over many years, and I don't know if other people do it, which I'm interested to talk to you about, is, you know, on a long time ago when we were making Batman Begins, we were in early development on that project. Chris was writing the script, and we knew that when we were going to go to the studio and sort of show them the script, we also wanted to really sort of show them the look of the movie too, so that they really understood sort of the vibe of the movie and sort of what the feel of it was going to be. And it worked so well, like having, at that point we were working with Nathan Crowley. He was working in the garage on the look of the movie while Chris was writing the script and working with David Goyer. And it was just a fantastic experience for us. And so from that point on, we started doing that on every movie, even when they weren't big sort of conceptual, you know, with cars and creating an entire world. And, you know, I know that Chris values that time massively, because it's sort of pure creativity. We don't even bring, as you know, our sort of our line producer on, we don't bring our DP, we don't bring anybody on. It's literally just about sort of the pure sort of blue sky thinking of what the project can be, creatively speaking, before the realities set in, and before you sort of have to start dealing with logistics. Is that something you'd ever done before? And if you hadn't, is it something you would like to do again? Or, you know, How was it for you?
It was, I think it's the smartest thing ever. And I did have the opportunity to do it on Nope with Jordan. Only really because of COVID, I think. I have never had that opportunity previous in my career. And I was with Jordan on Us. And I had like 6 weeks of prep with the entire crew. It was a jam. And I remember Jordan saying, I'm never doing this again in this way. And he changed it on Nope and extended. And we similarly did his version of a garage time. And we were able to develop the look of the film, which we actually had to pitch to Universal to get them to understand the movie Jordan wanted to make. I think at the time they had an idea of the film and Jordan had his idea. And so together, that is what Nope came to be. And then so carrying that over with Chris was thrilling because it was so effective with Jordan. But also Chris was a brand new director who I didn't have a shorthand with. I didn't know, we didn't know each other, or, and sort of the expectations. And it gave us that time to work all of that out without any noise. And to be honest, to not have the constraints of stressing about budget, all the logistics of time, budget, and money, and to just go, what do we want this film to be? And Chris has been living with this for, what was it, 2 years previous, maybe before you? I mean, did he start writing?
No. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. You came on in
October.
He then started writing it, I think, in February or March. I mean, early, like not that long. He had not been sitting with this one for that long. It was actually a weirdly fast process.
So so all of that I wanted to just glean from him, and just his mind, and sitting with, obviously going from the book and that wealth of information that was previously done for us, the research, the 25 years of the authors sort of putting this information together. But then the important thing was the screenplay and what we were making and what that needed to be. And to have the time to hear Chris's, just get in his mind's eye, but then be jumping on planes and seeing all of Oppenheimer's stomping grounds from DC to Berkeley without anyone saying, well, there's no way you can shoot in DC. There's no way you can shoot in Berkeley. It was sort of the possibilities were endless, and it was wonderful. And I think we were both just like, yes, we're going to come here and we're going to come here. And then you take all of that, but then even those places and visiting, it sits inside of you and you use that somewhere. And I feel like we used all of those trips and those places and infused them into where we needed to end up doing DC or Berkeley or you name it. And it was absolutely incredible. It was like a speedy get to know you, but also just diving into the essence of what Chris's vision of this thing, would up and be.
A secret laboratory. In the middle of nowhere. Keep everyone there until it's done. Why? If we don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best. Build them a town.
Why would I leave my family?
I told you, you can bring your family.
I'm not a soldier, Oppie.
A soldier? He's a general. I've got all the soldier I need. What can I tell them?
As much as you like, until you feel my boot on your balls.
You know isotopes, and you know explosives.
But you can't tell us what you're doing. Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
For a year or 2 or 3. It's about unleashing a strong force. Before the Nazis do.
Oh my God.
How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
Here you got a little town.
Everybody will go crazy.
They won't let me leave.
I won't let you leave.
just from my perspective, because I never go on those scouts, as you know, and it's like I feel like those are very much, I think I would be getting in the way, because I would be asking those questions of like, really, you think we could do, I mean, come on. I would be the person who's sort of pouring cold water when you really don't need cold water. Like, the whole idea is to go and look and like feel what these places are, and then okay, so then we deal with the reality of what we are and aren't able to do. But at the very least, you've seen them. You know, if you're starting from a place of, you know, somebody like me saying, there's no way you're going to be able to shoot in DC, so why would you even go? Like that doesn't help move the process forward, you know.
No, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think it only opened up opportunities because Chris and I could see the real thing, digest it, and then take the essence of it and then separate ourselves from it and go. But that essence is what I think carried through Oppenheimer and gave us the visual tonality and look and feel, and just how we wanted to immerse the audience in the essence. And so just all of the real places that he spent his time in those spaces had a profound impact that I don't think I could work any other way after, you know. So I think it's incredibly smart and diligent, and to just not have the noise or vying for the time to understand what Chris wants, and sort of, oh, can I get a meeting next Thursday maybe and sit down and discuss? And
yeah, that's the thing. Well, it's about figuring out what he and you do want, you know, because once you start bringing the other people on, all you guys are doing is answering questions. You know what I mean? It's like you sort of, so it's time to really fully form the idea of what the movie is creatively. And then pre-production starts, and it all starts getting a lot harder.
yes.
And I feel like on this one, we definitely had, you know, it was bumpy there for a while, because we had to sort of match the sort of the desire for what the world was going to be with the realities of sort of how we were going to achieve that. And it was, my memory is that it was a very tricky time, because, like, you know, materials were massively expensive, and, like, you know, we were still dealing with the aftermath of COVID. And I don't know about you, but like I feel like my least favorite bit on this film was having budget conversations where you have to wear a mask and you can't smile, you can't make it, you know, you can't have any sort of personal connection with people while you're having to have really difficult conversations about what we can and can't do, which, you know, I think in the absence of sort of actually having experienced that, I would never have imagined that would be an issue. But it really felt like it felt hard. But I have to, you know, give you so much kudos for the fact that you were flexible. You know, you weren't precious. You knew what it could be, but you also knew, you know, you were willing to work with us to sort of make it, you know, the best it could possibly be, but within the parameters of that we had set for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this, in the entire crew, it was such a wonderful group, because everybody came together, and everyone's common goal was just dedicated to executing Chris's vision at the highest level. It ultimately matter that the budget was X or the time was X. It was like, no, let's not. If that's getting in the way, we're approaching this the wrong way, and with the wrong attitude and the wrong sort of. And I think that's where I feel like we were this, you know, small but mighty film in a sense, and just we did rise up, and were able to be effective, but that came from the leadership. I mean, I can attest. I mean, the way you and Chris run a production is like no other, and the effectiveness of pouring cold water on us, as you say. I mean, it only makes it better. You know, it's sort of, if we had all the money and all the time, I think we would steer ourselves into a wall essentially, and you'd go like, isn't this great? And you're like, no, this isn't great.
You know, I agree completely. I mean, for me, I actually think that it's when you kind of, I think the magic actually happens when you're when you have a challenge. You know, it's like when if we were able to have unlimited resources and sort of build Los Alamos in its entirety, as it was when they first you know, put it together, then I don't know, I feel like you would miss a certain amount of magic. You know, I'm not really articulating it very well, but it seems to me that that's where sort of the heart of the creative juices sort of come from, is when you're sort of given parameters and you have to fit within them. I think Chris has, I don't know if he's ever talked to you before about this thing of, you know, we have a friend who's an artist, Tacita Dean, and she talks about this thing called medium resistance, which is basically to say that, you know, if you're, you know, making a sculpture with clay, the way that clay pushes back helps inform what the end product is. And I feel like that's sort of what we were dealing with this film, whereby, you know, it's not clay, but, you know, we were having to sort of, I think the script was enormously ambitious for the amount of money that we had, and sort of those structures within which we were having to work sort of helped inform what it ended up being in a very creative and magical way, because it just forced people to be smart. And I kind of think about all the ways that you and Hoyte and Chris, all those times that you sort of sat and really thought about, well, this is what we're really going to see, and this is, you know, when I think about, like, for example, Oppenheimer's their home in Los Alamos, and the fact that we could only shoot in one direction, but you had you were willing to go there and just sort of have a reverse that was a washing line. And when I think about the sort of iconic images in the movie, that's one of them. You know, it's just real magic comes from necessity somehow.
Yeah, I agree. And it's always uncomfortable, and I think there's a lot of doubt, and will this really, but that is where I think the trust again goes back to the leadership of Chris knowing and understanding what he wants and saying, yes, just trust me. And sometimes Hoyte and I being like, okay. But if we fought that or said, no, it has to be done this way, that's where we would run into trouble. But thankfully we you know, remained open in that way. But
yeah, it was an eminently flexible team in all the best ways.
We've got one hope. Build a town, build it fast.
We had many times we thought, how are we going to do this? The concept of recreating Los Alamos. The first week in the office, I was like, Chris, Los Alamos is massive.
When you're there and it just looks exactly like Los Alamos 1940s must have looked, it's just the most transporting thing. And you know that no detail has been overlooked, like it has all been thought about.
I know people feel like everything's going to end up on these sound stages somehow eventually. I just don't believe it. I just don't think there's any substitute for going out and really being in those places.
We've had great experiences shooting in real locations before that really showed us that sometimes it's just better to shoot it in the real place, and we were incredibly lucky on this film that we managed to do that.
Being at Princeton, there was this incredible feeling of just kind of chills upon chills upon chills.
To get to shoot in Oppenheimer's actual house, I mean, it's all surreal and yet immersive.
The walls have an energy, and they speak to you as a performer. It gives something extra, I think, to the scenes. And I think that the audience feels that.
It's happening, isn't it?
Do you, as a production designer, how do you feel about sort of making films that are set in real life? Like, do you find that to be exciting or sort of, is it all restrictive? Like that, what's the sort of I know that we had an amazing researcher on this film who did incredible amounts of legwork in all aspects of the movie. Like, is that something that you find exciting, recreating a real world, or
yes? I find it the most exciting, because I find the challenge, the stakes feel so high, because everyone already knows what it looks like if they've bothered to Google anything with the name Los Alamos or Oppenheimer in our case. It's out there, and then to be tasked to create, to almost take all that in, but create our own visual style, essence, whatever you call it, of that, and try to lose the audience in that world is challenging. More challenging to me than something that's not created at all, that you're inventing. So there's no, where's the bar? Because essentially, I don't know if that makes sense. It's no one's seen it before, so it's. But I think just personally, I really enjoy creating for very rich characters and their worlds, and trying to, the goal being to design something where it doesn't feel designed, to me is the most, not wanting my work. I don't even want to call it my work. It's the effort, but the art direction to be lost and to just melt into, to me, that's sort of, I guess, achieving that, and not having the audience feel or see that it's art directed, if that makes sense.
And that makes perfect sense. And when I think about like my favorite movies in terms of production design, to me, it's actually the ones that, it's the production design that kind of disappears in a way that isn't shouting about itself. It's like, it's the production design that makes me believe the world that I'm watching. Yes. You know what I mean? It's like, it's sort of the difference to me between the, a sort of an actor's performance that's showboaty and calling attention to itself versus a quiet but utterly believable performance. And I think of production design in the same way. It's sort of, it's textures that feel like real life, far more impressive to me than something that makes me think, I wonder what they were thinking when they, it's a whole different thing. And I think that this is what you did so brilliantly in Oppenheimer is, I mean, and I know I was there, you built an entire town and yet it felt so completely authentic and real, and it sort of looked like all the research material that I've seen, but not slavishly so. It felt real to me as I watched the movie. And here's a question for you actually, which I'm actually really interested in. Well, and you had worked with IMAX before, but do you feel like working on IMAX, when we're shooting a film with IMAX film, does that up the ante for you? Does that make your job harder, knowing that when people watch it on the big screen, they're going to see it in the most sort of clearest way they possibly could?
For me personally, it makes it, I'm so excited and thrilled, because it almost feels like the highest compliment to be able to have your work captured in the largest format versus, we'll just shoot this on digital, or even 35 at this point. It's 35. I will take it. I will take, but then when you're, and in the way that Chris and Hoyte, specifically on Oppenheimer, because yes, we shot IMAX on Nope, but with Oppenheimer, to the intimacy they used IMAX with, putting it in the actors' faces, carrying it into room 2022 in these very tight spaces, it just created something I've never ever seen before. And to get to, on the largest possible format, but in the tightest spaces, and you've all of the textures. And I think both Chris and I from the beginning wanted to keep the frames very simple and very, we didn't want to crowd them with over period, I don't want to say tchotchkes, but just dressing excess. And it just wanted to strip them back to the essence of what was this period, without screaming it's 1942 or whatever year we were in at that any given time. And I know Chris and I would sometimes you know, discuss water fountains, telephones, cars, what period, when, and have debates about accuracy. But you know, Chris, the idea of him wanting to have a timeless film and a very modern film, and I don't mean modern contemporary present day, I mean modern and in the past tense, but that I think we absolutely achieved that. We made that our goal, and that came through, and the IMAX capturing that only elevated those very raw, all natural materials, you know, and that to me was a gift, because, you know, most of the time your design is kind of mashed up and digital, and then it goes through all these processes, and then it comes out, and you're like,
yeah. Oh yeah, no, it was all right there on this one.
Yes.
So what was your, because you did, I mean, my goodness, you achieved many miracles on this one, but you sort of like, you know, when I think about the scope and the scale of the movie, and the, you know, working outside in you know, in Los Alamos, in sort of our set of Los Alamos in Abiquiu, and then on stages here in real locations. I mean, we shot in a bunch of locations that the Oppenheimers actually lived in, which is amazing to me. But with all the variety of sort of sets and so on the film, which is your favorite? Like, what was the set that made you feel like, oh wow, I really did something there that I'm proud of, or, you know, felt special?
I think Los Alamos probably, I mean, it feels, but that I was so terrified because of knowing and the real scale of the place, and being enamored with the research, and Chris finally saying, I am not making a documentary. You have to divorce yourself from this. I'm selling popcorn. I am not, all the things he would say to get me to, because, you know, you're looking at the real thing, and you're like, this place, Chris, was massive. And both he and Hoyta were just like, Ruth, whatever you give us, and this was probably more in the throngs of our budget crunching time of feeling like I'm not ever going to give them enough. And will this be believable? And will this not be contrived? And will this will this work? And I think I just wanted to make sure it would work. And I do believe after seeing the film, it works. But I just I felt like I had to fly blind there, because seeing the original research and my first time with Chris, and just sort of go, you know, is he truly happy? Is this enough? Am I not, you know, do I need to be thinking about another way to make this more effective, better, larger, etc.? So I think that one, I mean, and also, you know, Trinity doing the Trinity base, I guess the Trinity site as a whole, that we had to build the tower from the ground up, base camp, all of the bunkers. That was incredibly challenging, because spatially they were miles apart. And how were we going to, we couldn't put them miles apart. We would lose days in traveling, and we needed one base camp. But you couldn't see the base camp, but we were doing helicopter shots, and, you know, it's sort of constantly getting thrown at you of like, but I need to be up here, I need to be over here, I need to be over there, so that also just, and that site, I think it's when Frank and Oppenheimer who are driving out in the Jeep across the expanse of I mean, yeah, you're just like, they might as well be in the Serengeti. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere, and that shot, I mean, there's no sets in it, but it's that landscape, it's the palatialness, it's what we were able to, we were in the middle of nowhere, and that was down in Berlin, which is 4 hours from where we were in Ghost Ranch, and being able to still, within our very tight time frame, pull it off, I think was rewarding to know that the crews, everybody showed up and really they're all and did that. I mean,
well, I would say, I mean, I think that, you know, speaking to the thing of like, you know, and this was, I think, a big thing, both in the exterior Los Alamos set, but also down at the Trinity test site. You straddle this line between pure creativity and sort of what something needs to look like, but also having to weigh up issues around obviously budget, but also logistics and so on. And the thing that you know, I remember so clearly sort of being up on that mesa, looking, you know, Chris and Hoyter was shooting Los Alamos, and it felt like people would gather anywhere they wanted to look, but you had thought it through so perfectly, and each of those buildings had a space for departments to hide in. And I mean, it's just so brilliant, Ruth. I can't even begin to tell you. I'm just like, you know, I'm so grateful to you, because it's not only about, as a producer, it's not only about the look of the film, and the look of the film is just spectacular. And I think it sort of has all those real life textures that I'm talking about when I talk about sort of production design that just serves the story rather than overshadowing it. But you designed it in such a way that we were able as a company to logistically make it work. You know, we were able to have everything that we needed nearby, but also out of sight. You know, as soon as Nilo had said it's time to shoot, people had places to hide in. You know, there were just so many people up there that it would have been impossible without that. And you know, the whole idea was to capture the landscape, and without the thought that you put into sort of making it work from a shooting crew standpoint, you know, we would never have been able to achieve the schedule that we did. So I'm very grateful to you for that. And the other thing I'm going to say, which I was so impressed by about the way you work, because of course we'd never worked with each other before. And as I said, we'd had this slightly, I think all of us had a very contentious pre-production period. And I'm always like, you know, for me, prep is the worst thing, because all you're doing is sitting there thinking about, you know, what's going to go horribly wrong. But what I love about the way you work, and it was really a revelation to me, is that once we start shooting, it's not like you disappear. You're right there with us. You know, you don't just open a set and then leave. You're there for all of it. And I don't know how you manage to do that when you're also prepping sets that we're going to be shooting in a few weeks down the line. I mean, you know, that's an amazing talent, frankly, but it's also, you know, that sort of follow through. I think it really leads to a great movie in the end, because there's nothing in the frame that you have not okayed, you know, that you haven't had your hands on. I feel like it would be very easy for you to go off to the next fire that you need to put up, but instead you were right there with us. And if there was any question about anything, you know, you were there. So thank you.
Of course. No, I think I think our responsibility as art directors, production designers of a specific film is, you know, our job isn't, I don't believe my job is done until obviously the camera's rolling, but up until that moment, I want to make sure it's right, because I think and that's why I like to always open set, to make sure if for some reason Chris and Hoyter go, oh my gosh, look at the light over here. And they're very fluid. They're, you know, and that's what I love about Chris, is he's very organic, and he will move to the best situation, and he's not married to storyboards or sort of rigidity. And I think therefore I want to make sure if he's doing a 360, it's right. And it's not like, oh, well, you said you weren't shooting there. It's like, no, now I am shooting there. And so I think it's just, you know, making sure, and ultimately I think because we have that closest relationship, you can only tell your crew so much, and they've got eyes and they're watching, but ultimately I think it's intuitive at that point with the process and how Chris, Hoyter, and I are working. And I mean, if I could, I would be there all day long, but that's not possible. Not that it's necessary even, but I think just just allowing the best thing, because once it's on there, it's on there. There's no redoing, there's no do-over.
Exactly. Yeah. What that IMAX camera captures, it captures. And that's, well, and obviously you weren't, as you said, you couldn't be there 100% of the time, but I never felt your absence. So you felt very present to me every day of that shoot. And I found that to be really, really refreshing. And frankly, now I don't know that I'll never be able to work with anyone who doesn't. So. So when you watched the film, what was the thing that sort of most surprised you about, like, anything that you sort of had pictured in one way? Did you feel like it was all exactly as you'd anticipated it would be?
No, I mean, the one thing you don't get when you're in the grind of it is that there's no, emotionality isn't really a word, but you're detached from the emotion, because you are tasked and it needs to be executed. And I think getting to see the film, I really couldn't speak, and Chris was like, let's have lunch, and I was like, I can't talk. Because it was you take on Oppenheimer, and every time Chris said, you have to trust me, all of that, I think I just was like, yeah, he's right. Oh, he's right. Oh, he's right. Oh, he's right. When you're watching, but overall, just the emotional roller coaster you go on with Oppenheimer, I think I don't have time to be in those moments ever, because it's more from an execution standpoint, and your emotions are, you want to remain strong. And I think I was never able to, and you're just not, it's not there. And the combination of everybody from the sound design and the score and the cinematography, all of it just falling into place, the visual effects and the special effects, it blew me away. And I think it blew all of us away. I mean, in talking to each department head after, Hoyt was like, have you seen it yet? And he called me, and Scott Fisher, after he saw it, he said, so we were, I think for each of us to understand the road we took. And as you said, I don't want people to think we had a contentious prep, but I would say it was more of, it was an extremely challenging thing to say, you're going to be in 5 states, you're going to shoot for 57 days, you have 150 sets, and it has to be perfect.
It was very ambitious. When I look back on this film, I just think, it's kind of funny, because, you go through the pain of prep, the various pains of the shoot, and then we sort of have these months of sitting here while Chris and Jen edit, and you begin to have time to sort of move on from all of that stuff, and it's easy to forget, once you've achieved what you fought to achieve, how ambitious it was. And I sort of look back on that early prep phase and sort of putting it all together, and just thinking it was just incredibly sort of, Chris's ambitions were huge, everybody's ambitions were huge for this project, and so it was a lot to achieve, and I'm very, very glad to say that I feel like we will achieve what we set out to, which isn't always the case with movies. So
but I think what was awe-inspiring with Chris is he challenged each of us. I even remember in that early pre-production meeting when he was like, I'm tasking Kodak to figure out this black and white film. And I think we were all at that point going, maybe we should move off of it. Maybe, Chris, you should move off of it. And he's like, I am not moving off of it. And because he was like that with each of us in our worlds, no one just gave in. I mean, what if what if he had just been like, okay, you guys are right. I mean, that's not Chris. But.
Well, this is the thing about Chris, and I think that it's interesting, because I think across the board, as you say, he does that to everybody. He challenges everybody to give their absolute best and beyond. What I find inspiring about him is that he does the same. So it's not like you can kind of resent him for it, although, you know, sometimes I'm like, really? But at the same time, I know that he is out there working as hard as anybody, and you know, you can never fault him for that. So he kind of he sort of brings everybody along with him, but no, he often doesn't take no for an answer, which
no, but he did that, and he did that. I mean, that is how, you know, was originally we were going to shoot many more days, but his homework, everybody gave, and that I think is what the perseverance of each. It wasn't like Chris is up here. There's no, and that just made you want to work harder. If I'm not finding my words, but I think because his leadership, again, your leadership, it's like, well, look at what they're in this with us. We're not on our own ship over here. We're all on the same boat. And I think I'm curious, just when you're in Chris's early conversations at the very beginning, when he outlined the concept for the film, was it what was it? Was it as ambitious as what we did? Were you thinking it would be as ambitious or difficult as what we, you know, just those very early with taking on, you know, the screenplay?
I mean, I think that when we first, so, you know, he's always been slightly obsessed by Oppenheimer. There's always been that thing. And when Chuck first brought us the book, I remember reading it and just thinking, oh my gosh, this is huge. Like, you know, it's huge. And I don't really know how you distill. I mean, there was so much in it that's fascinating, but I couldn't really wrap my head around sort of how you distill that into something that's going to be sort of entertaining and move fast and sort of engaged. But he had his sort of way into that. And I think that the good thing about Chris is he's very good at explaining what it is. He's not just got a vision, he's also very good at explaining it, which I think is half the battle, frankly, with directors. It's like, you know, if you can't articulate what it is you want, then, you know, you're kind of screwed. But he, I think that when we were talking about the fact that it was going to be a 3-hour film, he was very clear right from the beginning that he wanted to shoot black and white for some of it. And he wanted to shoot it on you know, these big IMAX cameras, because he felt that it was a very cinematic, and that would sort of make it feel as epic as he felt the story should be. I remember feeling very strongly that it was going to be a bit of a, you know, we were sitting in a world where filmmakers were finding it hard to get original films greenlit. You know, I mean, it's not based on any IP. It's not a no-brainer, shall we say. And I knew that we were going to have to really be very clear about sort of how much we were willing to spend, because we want to work again.
Yes.
we want to work for, you know, a long time. We want to have long careers. We don't want anyone to any studios not to want to work with us because we're irresponsible. And so we were very clear about that. And that I felt to me felt like the ambition of the project from a producerial standpoint, is, you know, making a film for a sort of that had all of those things, the locations, the spectacle, the cast. I mean, an enormous cast. And also, you know, at this point, I'd never been to Los Alamos, so I didn't really fully understand how different modern day Los Alamos is to the, you know, what we were portraying in the film. So I was sort of thinking it was ambitious even without factoring in that we were going to have to build an entire town. And so for me, you know, I definitely felt I knew that this one was probably going to be fairly challenging, but, you know, we'd done films like that before. I mean, Dunkirk was also, you know, a very ambitious film for what probably was about half what anyone else would make it for. Do you know what I mean? And so we'd done it before, and we have amazing collaborators. You know, I felt confident that everybody would be able to sort of come up with smart ways of doing it. And as when we went into it, we weren't sure at all that we'd be able to go to Berkeley or even get some of those shots in Europe that were going to expand the world of the film. But Chris always goes in sort of trying to claw back all the way, and then by the end we were able to do that, which was great.
No, absolutely. And I think, but that was a testament to how you all too ran the production and coming into it, it wasn't like we were blindsided. It was very clear, the intentions of, this is what we're making this movie for, and we have to find a path forward. And I think, so there was never, as daunting as it was, I never doubted we wouldn't get there. I just sometimes didn't know how we would get there.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
But again, and I do think it goes back to sort of the thing of Chris expecting a lot of people, but he always he knows that he has a part to play too.
But
and
he does.
In this case, it was really mapping out what he needed from Los Alamos, which directions he would shoot in, really being very strategic in that way, but also, giving up days so that we were able to, because he in fact, it wasn't just as simple as sort of going through it and saying, okay, well, I'm sure we can do it without this time or that many days. It was really about sort of sitting down with Hoyter and saying, okay, well, how are we going to shoot it? How can we shoot this in the quickest way possible? And Hoyter, as you were, was a fantastic. He was willing to go there and adjust his methodology in order to get us there. And then, frankly, we got pretty lucky too. When I think about it, being at Trinity and that wind blowing, which was what we needed. And how insane is that? We got lucky. We got lucky.
That day was wild too. And it just filming right through it. There was no pause. There was no stop. And that is what, it was all the snow leading up to Los Alamos. I remember calling Tom Hayslip going, this set will not be ready. We will not, warning, red flags, sound the alarm. And he was like, well, why are you? I'm like, we have a foot of snow that just poured down and we're supposed to be here in 2 weeks. And the construction can't even make it up the hill right now. And he's like, oh, you'll be fine. Like,
so when you watch the film, which is the scene that comes through that gives you the most like PTSD? Like, which is the one where you're just like, oh my God, that was horrendous?
You know which one, the White House.
But it looks so good. You look so good. Yeah, that was crazy. And yes, we should probably explain that we thought we were going to be in a location, and then that fell through. With how many days to go? I think it was.
We had about 5. I think maybe we had 7, but we needed a day to work out. Find a stage. We needed a stage, so we went straight to Universal to say what stage is available. Then we needed to pull so yes, we found out at the 11th hour we unfortunately had lost a location, the Nixon Library, which was in Yorba Linda, which I never knew, but every president has a Oval Office in whatever birth state or state that they choose. But so that fell through, and we were going to turn it into obviously Truman's office. But Samantha was so smart, because early on in prep, she had said, I should put a Oval Office. I think there was like 3 out there in the world. One in ours, we had the Veep set on hold. And I don't remember if it was Sony or which set shop it was, Beechwood or whatever. And they were like, do you guys still want to hold this? And I think Sam was just like, oh yeah, it didn't cost anything. It was just like, oh yeah, and then lo and behold, she's like, I still have that set on hold.
Wow.
Sounds like you cursed us. But it was just the Oval Office, and we needed the lobby, and we needed the entire cabinet room. But I think what gave me the most PTSD is we were shooting about 3 locations a day across Los Angeles. So we were dressing and wrapping and dressing and wrapping and dressing and wrapping and sort of leapfrogging. Oh, and by the way, let's just go over here and get this whole thing built. And because I remember walking into, it was Kitty and Oppenheimer's house. So we ended up doing the majority of Berkeley, all the homes in the Pasadena area. It was very much like the Berkeley Hills. They were all craftsmen. It looked just like the house Oppenheimer lived in when he was there. And Jean's in the party house. But we, Chris and I did a whirlwind tour before early on and saw all of these locations, but then it's the first time Chris is coming back to them, seeing them dressed. Yes, he's seeing photographs and boards and things, but then when you walk in and he's deep in how he's seeing this and wanting to shoot this. And I think that he had decided to move the entire scene into the kitchen of the house and have the conversation between it was the
martini conversation.
Yeah. Yes, and instead of in the living room or the dining room, and what I didn't really explain to Chris was they had a what are those fancy fridges? They're built in. They're the
like a Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero, thank you. So the homeowner, I said, this is not period. No, this is custom made, built as fed, okay. I think I just thought we could take the refrigerator out and we'd be fine, and put in, no. So I ended up making like a soffit, building an entire wall around it. I think we hung a picture or something, and Chris walked in and his memory. What is this? And this is the exact moment we found out we lost the White House. And I go, well, there's this Sub-Zero. And he goes, Ruth, the whole scene is taking place in here. I'm filming the whole scene here. I'm not shooting Oppenheimer against I think, and I just remember going, but we immediately go, well, what if we turn it into a bar and we bring in this and we like a side table and he goes, yeah, that would be great. And a painting and a thing. And it was like I wanted to be present in those moments. The exact reason I like to open set, for those moments of him going, oh, well, I've decided to move the whole thing over here. Wow. And what is this? I'll tell you exactly what that is, but
I feel like we, as there's that moment in the film where Oppenheimer says that he and Kitty have walked through fire. I feel like we walked through fire together, and I think I've said to you before that if ever there's a zombie apocalypse, I want to be with the film crew because
yes, it's true,
film crew. And particularly art department are, work miracles. And I look back on sort of the craziness of that particular moment in our shoot where you were being pulled in all directions. And, it was absolutely incredible to see the way you work in that most pressurized of situations and still come up with creative solutions. Like somehow, I don't even know how you did it, but it was a very impressive sight to see.
Thank you. But I mean, I think it goes hand in hand with just obviously Chris is simultaneously coming up with these creative ideas, and you want to execute at the highest level, and that challenge and that sort of, how do I figure this out? How do I to me, that's the drive and the passion and the just achieving that and nailing that, but not ever truly understanding how I'm going to do it. I feel like I never have the answer, and it finds its way. It's the movie gods or something where you just sort of have to remain open. And I think that's what's was so much fun about Oppenheimer. At the end of the day, it was so incredibly hard, but it was fun. I mean, it was you're all the bits where we just brought that back to life, and watching the actors every day. I mean, it just, to me, Emma, and I don't know from your previous shoots, it just seemed like everybody showed up and nobody was, I mean, the actors would stand there sometimes for hours. And normally they're like, I'm leaving, or I'm going back to my trailer. No, nobody was leaving anywhere. It was like, we are.
Thank goodness, because we would have made that schedule if they did. I think Matt said once that, pointed out the fact that we give everyone 2 bangers, and so there's
Yeah.
really no impetus to go back to your it works.
But you know that and I think all of us, every single person, no matter if you were the actor, whichever department, that uncomfortability, not that it's on purpose, but Chris, it's that goes right back into the film. And that's what's so, to me, awe-inspiring about how Chris can demand that, and it's delivered. And it's and it's delivered amongst everybody.
Well, it feels like everyone's on the same team, I think,
Yes.
which is nice, and it's honestly an imperative. I mean, you know, you can't make these movies if you're not all on the same team.
Yes. No, absolutely, absolutely. So no, I think everybody. I think it's just it's an incredible piece that I think our hearts and souls were poured into, and that is I mean, I don't think any of us in our wildest dreams believed it would do as well as it did.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think that you know, we thought, gosh, well, maybe it'll do as well as Dunkirk. That would be really, really nice. But it doesn't have action, and it doesn't, you know, it's not a big sort of you know, Second World War, you know, but action.
Yeah.
And, so it was absolutely amazing to me, and I can't tell you how incredible it is to sort of have people come up to you on the street and be like, wow, I've seen the film 5 times. And that has happened to us. It's really amazing. And what's really exciting, particularly because I think that we've all been hearing, you know, the sort of the drumbeat of theatrical is dead. Kids have no attention spans anymore. They can only watch TikTok. And, you know, to go to theaters and see really young audiences, and it feels like young audiences are kind of owning theaters in a different way now. And the idea that, you know, a 3-hour film that spent a lot of time with men talking in rooms could sort of have the success that this film has had is absolutely incredible, and I think testament to, you know, everyone's fine work. So
yes, yeah. Good.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think we should do it after every movie.
Yes.
Emma, talk about the way it went. And it's, you know, I personally find it really useful hearing about the way it was from your perspective. So thank you for this. And thank you to everybody for watching.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a privilege.